Hello and welcome to another action-packed breakdown video where we will be taking a deep dive into 4 of the most interesting matchups taking place this weekend at UFC 244. We'll be going deep into these fights to look at them from a betting perspective, and I will have at least one very good value betting tip for you in this video, so make sure you keep watching the whole thing right through until the end. And also, before we go any further, I want to say a big sorry to everyone watching this, because I was planning to put this video out a couple days ago. Problem is, it just kept getting delayed because UFC 244 has felt like one of these events where we have just had a never-ending stream of chaos. At first, we had all the drama surrounding whether Darren Till was even going to make the fight. Then we had the staff issue with Kevin Lee, the towel issue with Kelvin Gastelum. With all this chaos unfolding, I just thought, why not wait until all the weigh-ins are done? We know where we are with all the fighters, and I can sit down with all the information we have available to work with and basically give you my final verdict on these fights. So I was planning on putting this video out a couple days ago, but I thought you guys would find it much more valuable if I waited closer to the time of the fights, once we've had time to see how both guys look at the stare downs at the weigh-ins. Both guys have looked at the weigh-ins, that kind of thing, because now in this video, we can assess Kevin Lee's staff, the issue with Kelvin Gastelum's towel, how much, the delayed flight for Darren Till might affect his weight cut, might affect his performance on Saturday night. So I think it's worth waiting for. Hopefully you are going to agree this video should be a good one. And also, before we start, I also want to say a big shout out to Robinson Canolis, who is one of my VIP members, who is going to be watching this video from work. It sucks you have to work on a Saturday, dude, but hopefully we can help pass the time a little bit faster by putting out this video. Hopefully you enjoy it, dude. So, the first fight that I want to get into in today's video is going to be Stephen Thompson against Vicente Luque. Now, there's going to be a bit of a running theme in this video today where I'm going to be saying that before I began researching a fight, I really liked one guy. And then once I'd done my research, I completely liked the other guy. That is going to be a running theme throughout today's video, so get used to it. And it is very true for this first fight that I want to look into, because you guys know the way I work by now. Every Monday morning, I wake up, put my boots on for work, sit at this computer, scan through all the fights taking place on the upcoming Bellator and UFC cards, and I prioritise the best fights to research where I think the best betting opportunities would be. And the fight between Vicente Luque and Stephen Thompson was actually the second fight that I looked into this week, because Luque was one of the first names that jumped out at me. I actually thought that he would be an amazing bet, because in my mind, I have got, a guy in Vicente Luque who's very aggressive, very well-rounded, hits very hard, has a great chin, great cardio. Fighting a guy in Stephen Thompson who, is fair to say, is a little bit chinny. If we look back through Stephen Thompson's record, we can see that he was knocked out by Anthony Pettis. He was dropped in the 5th round against Darren Till. He was dropped by Tyron Woodley in both these fights. He was dropped by Jake Ellenberger. So Stephen Thompson has got a long history of being rocked, dropped, wobbled or knocked out. And we know the Vicente Luque does hit very hard, carries serious knockout power in his hands. It's the reason why he has so many finishes via strikes on his record. Belal Muhammad, Hector Urbina, Chad Laprice, Jalen Turner, Derek Krantz, and of course he inflicted significant damage in Mike Perry in his last fight. So I was thinking, Luque is going to be able to get inside, land a bomb on Thompson and put him away, just like, I'm not going to say like many guys have been able to do, but many guys have certainly been able to hurt Thompson very bad. Now, I'm not saying that isn't going to happen. That could very well happen, but after researching this fight, this is one of the reasons why fight research is so important, because beforehand I was feeling like Luque would be a great bet, and then when I started to look at footage of both these guys, didn't like him so much, because what I actually noticed with Luque is that he's one of these guys that does very well to get into good positions to land shots on his opponent, but he is a little bit gun shy. He does struggle to pull the trigger. And I mean, this is a guy that struggles to pull the trigger against orthodox fighters, traditional styled opponents that'll stand right in front of him. And he's still a little bit gun shy. You know, he sees the opportunities, but you can see he's still a little bit reluctant to let his hands go. And of course, the problem you've got when you face a guy like Stephen Thompson is that if you hesitate to pull the trigger, you know, he's in a different postcode by the time you let your hands go. Stephen Thompson's very elusive, great striking defense, you know, great footwork, difficult to hit. And the way I look at this fight now after researching it is that, you know, if Vicente Luque struggles to land on guys that are, you know, very traditional, very orthodox, very ordinary, he may really, really struggle to deal with Stephen Thompson's tricky style. And for that reason, you know, I really started to like Luque a lot less in this fight. Because there's always that saying, right? You know, I think Chael Sonnen was the guy that first came up with it. When you try and win a fight by knockout, you often end up losing a decision. And I feel that's what might happen to Luque here. You know, you see most of his wins are inside the distance. But when his fights have gone the distance, he tends to lose. You know, lost a decision to Mike Graves. You know, lost a split decision to Haider Hassan. Tons of finishes inside the distance, but then the next fight that goes the distance, lose a decision. Again, tons of finishes, but again, when the fight goes the distance, only scrapes through a split decision and beats Mike Perry. I actually scored this fight for Mike Perry. I had Mike Perry winning 29-28. And, you know, I believe there was a good chance that Luque was going to lose this fight as well against Brian Bahrain. He was like 5 or 6 seconds away from losing a decision. So the point I'm trying to make is Luque is very much one of these guys that if he doesn't win inside the distance, his fights are almost always going to be close just because he's gun shy, doesn't pull the trigger, he is a little bit passive, and because of that he fails to put his stamp on rounds. You know, even in the Mike Perry fight, one of the reasons why, you know, in the first and second round it was quite close is just because it was quite clear that Perry was struggling with Luque's pressure. It was quite clear that Perry was starting to slow down. But Luque would pressure Perry, he would back him into a corner, he would get Perry really overreacting to everything, looking very uncomfortable, and then he just wouldn't pull the trigger. So that is what I've noticed about Luque. But you know, another thing to take into consideration here, if we start to talk about X factors, I mean, that's how I see the dynamic playing out. I really see that if this fight goes the distance, I just see Luque coming forward, and Thompson staying on the outside, fighting long, loads of footwork, and just chipping away at him and outpointing him, really. Now, there are a couple of X factors which we've got to take into consideration here. The first and most significant, in my opinion, is that, you know, Stephen Thompson's 36 years old now, and in terms of miles on the clock, he really is getting up there. I mean, he's had almost 20 pro MMA fights, and like we said earlier, he's been rocked, dropped, knocked out or wobbled multiple times in his MMA career. He's also probably had hundreds of amateur kickboxing fights because I believe he started training kickboxing and karate when he was like 5 years old. And he's also had almost 70 pro kickboxing matches. So that's tons of damage, tons of head trauma. And I know that, you know, his striking defense is very good. He's very difficult to hit. But a sign that he's getting, you know, dropped so frequently in MMA is perhaps a sign that Father Time's starting to catch up with him. And what I would also say is that the knockout that he suffered in his last fight against Anthony Pettis was absolutely devastating. It was a terrible KO. It was absolutely brutal. You know, Thompson was completely out. And these are the kind of knockouts that can change a fighter forever. You know, this kind of damage can really affect your brain, you know, your durability. And even if it doesn't affect you from a physical point of view, even if it doesn't physically affect your ability to take a punch, can have a big impact on your confidence. You know, it can make you more reluctant to pull the trigger, less aggressive, a little bit more nervous, a little bit more hesitant. There are all kinds of ways that really bad knockouts can affect you. So, you know, we have seen Thompson get knocked out, rock, drop, wobble multiple times in his career, but, you know, he hasn't actually been knocked out as such in his entire career. This was the first time. If you see, you know, his other losses were all by decision, even though he has taken a lot of damage in these fights, particularly against Woodley and Till. Just something to bear in mind. Father Time might be starting to catch up with Stephen Thompson. And on the flip side, obviously, Luque, he's only 27 years old. He's young. He's hungry. He's going to be making big improvements from fight to fight. And, you know, maybe maybe he will turn a corner after the Perry fight. Maybe he'll think, oh, Jesus, that was a split decision. I almost lost. Maybe I need to fight more aggressively. Maybe Thompson, or maybe Luque does his homework on Thompson and he thinks, fuck it, you know what I mean? I'm not going to respect this old guy. If I just go out there, get inside, fight my way into boxing range and let my hands go, there's a good chance I can knock this guy out. Because remember, one of the reasons why it's so hard to make money betting on MMA pre-fight is because this is such an unpredictable sport. To reach the highest level of anything, you've got to constantly improve and learn from your mistakes, and these fighters are going to be on a journey of continual self-improvement. Just over the last few weeks, we've seen young fighters show tremendous improvements. If you were to watch my live research videos on guys like Sean Woodson, Sean Brady, Macy Barber, these are three fighters that you would have seen look completely different just 18 months ago to how they looked just a few weeks ago. They made significant improvements in a short space of time. So who knows how Vicente Luque is going to look on Saturday night? He could really, really cause Thompson some problems if he comes out aggressive, because yes, Thompson's dangerous. Yes, Thompson's hits hard. But one of the things that makes Luque so great is that he is very tough. He does have cardio for days. He does have a great chin. And if we're betting on chins here, if these boys get into a firefight, if Luque throws caution to the wind, comes forward and forces Thompson to engage, I would bet on Luque's chin all day long. So before we wrap this up and tell you how I'm feeling about this fight from a betting perspective, just scanning through my notes to make sure I haven't missed anything out important here. I think I've basically covered everything. So if we look at this fight from a betting point of view, all week these boys have been roughly floating around even. I think Thompson earlier on in the week was a slight favourite, but now both these boys are around even money. So, if we say we could bet both these guys at, say, an average of 1.90, minus 1.90 gives us an implied it gives money line odds of minus 111 for an implied probability of 53%. And in the eyes of the bookies, this is clearly a 50-50 fight, right? And these are usually the kind of fights that I really like for betting, because, if you can just find that edge for one guy, and lean 60-40 in favour of one guy, you've got a good amount of value here. You've got a nice 8% or 7 or 8% margin over the bookie. And in this fight, it is a tricky one for me, because I feel like if you bet on Thompson this weekend and, he goes out and gets knocked out, well, you kind of asked for it, because Luque is very dangerous. Thompson's very chinny. On the other hand, if you go out and bet Luque this weekend and he just ends up following Thompson around the octagon for 15 minutes, seeing his shots fall short and, getting leg kicked and picked off from the outside for the whole fight, then you're going to feel pretty damn frustrated with yourself as well, because these are two significant red flags with both these guys. We know that they each have the strengths to exploit each other's weaknesses. Thompson has the elusiveness, the counter striking to pick Luque off as he comes forward and outpoint him. But at the same time, we know Luque's definitely got the power to hurt Thompson. So from a betting perspective, this is a complicated one for me, and it's not a fight I particularly like for betting. This is a fight that I would pass on, which feels strange, because I was very, very high on Luque before I'd done my research. But again, this is why fight research is so important. Your mind will play tricks on you. And, if you just go back and watch a little bit of footage on Luque, particularly the first 2 rounds of the Perry fight, you will see exactly what I mean. He can be quite passive at times. If you go back and particularly watch the fights that have gone the distance, he does struggle. I haven't really mentioned the grappling aspect of this fight, because I don't believe it'll be a factor, and I don't want this video to be any longer than it needs to be. Ultimately, Luque does have a high level ground game, but he never looks to take fights to the ground. And even if he did want to take Thompson down, Thompson's got very good takedown defense, and he's very good at scrambling back to his feet when you take him down. So I don't think this fight's going to go to the ground. This should be a stand-up fight. It's either going to be Luque by knockout or Thompson by decision. Sorry to be boring, boys, but I do recommend a pass on that one. But hopefully you found that information useful. And if you disagree with me or you think I've missed anything out, please leave a comment below and let me know. I don't always have time to respond to your comments because I do get tons of comments, which I'm very grateful for. But even if I don't respond to your comments, I promise you I fucking read every one of your comments. I really enjoy reading them, so let me know what you think about that fight, boys. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like button on the video and subscribe. Now we get into the next fight that I want to talk about, which is Blagoy Ivanov against Derek Black Beast Lewis. And again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this is another one of those fights where at the beginning of the week, before I jumped into doing my research, I leaned very, very heavily towards Blagoy Ivanov. Thought he would be a great bet because, you know, on the surface, you know, working from hazy memories, Blagoy Ivanov's 18-2. He's had 20 pro fights. He's competed against a lot of dangerous guys throughout his career. And if we check his record, you know, in 20 pro fights, he's never been KO'd, ever. You know, he's fought some really tough guys, heavy-hitting guys like LeVar Johnson, Smilinho Rama, Alexander Volkov, Sean Jordan, Junior Dos Santos, Ben Rothwell, Tai Tuivasa, and you're thinking, you know what, this guy fighting in the heavyweight division, to have competed 20 times in the heavyweight division and never been KO'd is so impressive. It just goes to show how tough this guy is and how amazing his chin is, because at the end of the day, every heavyweight carries knockout power, and when two big boys are swinging hard at each other, you know, eventually you'd have to expect a big kill shot to land on Ivanov. But in 20 pro fights it's never happened, which is just a testament, like I say, to his toughness and his chin. And that's just one of the reasons why I liked Ivanov. Of course, the other reason is that Derek Lewis really hasn't looked good over the last couple of years. You know, he's talked about back injuries plaguing him, knee injuries plaguing him, and he's become one of these single shot fighters, which, again, to quote Chael, you know, he's one of these guys that if he doesn't win by knockout, he often ends up losing a decision. I mean, I know he won a very, very close decision against Ngannou in a very, very strange fight, but really, you know, Derek Lewis is one of these guys with a real kill or be killed style. Throws a very low number of strikes per round. You know, very sloppy striker, very poor technique, very low level on the ground. No wrestling at all, really. Just does everything with like power and athleticism, which is one of the reasons why his cardio isn't great, because he doesn't do anything with proper technique. He kind of powers into everything. And when you look at Lewis, you know, you see a guy who only throws single shots, only throws a low volume of strikes, you know, doesn't really have very good wrestling. You know, you take a look at a guy like Blagoy Ivanov. If we just take a look at his Instagram profile here, you know, Ivanov, you know, is a decent wrestler, decent takedown defense. You know, trains at AKA with the likes of Daniel Cormier, you know, Cain Velasquez. He trained at AKA for a very, very long time. Here you can see him with the Eagle, Khabib Nurmagomedov. So, you know, unlikely that Derek Lewis is going to be able to get this fight to the ground. You know, Lewis just doesn't have the offensive wrestling to get it there, doesn't have the ground game to hold Ivanov down unless he would land in a really bad position. So, initially I was very much liking Ivanov here, but again, with you know, with the last fight, it is so important to do fight research, because on paper, Ivanov looks very good here. You know, this is where wiki cappers can get caught out. This is why it's so important to study footage, because after watching footage on both these guys, there's no way that I'd bet Ivanov in this fight, because even though he's never been knocked out, he is very hittable. Like, he gets hit a lot. I mean, if you go back and watch his last fight against Tai Tuivasa, he just stood right in front of Tuivasa and ate tons of shots. I mean, Tuivasa even made him do the stanky leg in the second round. And even though Derek Lewis hasn't looked good over the last couple of years, when he throws, like, he's one of the few fighters that when he throws, even when he misses, even when his shots get blocked, he makes me wince. Like, he's so powerful. It's fucking ridiculous how powerful this guy is. He's absolutely devastating. So there's no way I would bet on a guy like Ivanov against someone like Lewis that hits so hard, because Ivanov is there to be hit. There's no doubt about it. His striking defense isn't great, but again, a little bit similar to like the Thompson and Luque fight, where it's kind of like, you know, we know that if this fight goes the distance, Ivanov has probably outworked Lewis over 3 rounds, chipped away at him, you know, outpointed him, and he's going to win a decision. Lewis has got this kill or be killed style where he headhunts, and again, you try and win a fight by knockout, you often end up losing a decision. And personally, I hate betting in situations like that. If I'm going to bet, I want my fighter to be able to win on merit over the course of 3 rounds. I want to feel confident that at the end of that 15 minutes, they're skilled enough to be the better fighter, to have their hand raised. I don't like to bet on a fighter that probably needs to win inside the distance. It's just I just don't personally feel like that's a strong position to put your money in. But there are, again, like with the last fight, some X factors to pay attention to. Because we do know that Derek Lewis has been battling some significant injuries over the last couple of years. You know what? I might have mixed up the order I want to talk about this. We'll get into that in a minute. The only final thing that I want to say about Derek Lewis, maybe let's just look at the odds first. So the odds, again, just like the last fight, both guys are roughly dead even. So if we say both guys currently around about 1.91, which is minus 110 for an implied probability of 52%. Again, the bookies are capping this as a 50-50 fight. Ivanov's definitely there to be hit. There's no doubt about it. And Derek Lewis has been blessed with 2 fucking nuclear missiles in his hands. And his fucking kicks are pretty devastating as well. So there's a very, very good chance that Lewis catches Ivanov with something big and knocks him out, even though Ivanov's never been knocked out before. But there is one real big thing that bothers me with Derek Lewis, and it's that he does tend to get hurt a lot and then go into a defensive shell. Or, I hate to use the example, I hate to use the expression look for a way out, but I don't know which other way to put it. But if you look at his fights against, for example, Junior Dos Santos, he ate a body shot in that first round and turtled up. You know, Junior Dos Santos was able to hurt his body very, very badly. And as soon as, JDS hurt Lewis's body, of course Lewis was still in the fight. He was trying to win the fight. He was still trying to take JDS's head off. But he does go into a defensive shell. We saw the same thing in the Mark Hunt fight, very early on in this fight. Derek Lewis injured his back and he couldn't really move around the octagon too well. Just went into a defensive shell and again, kind of looked for a way out, just kind of went into survival mode and became even more of a single shot passive fighter. And the thing that bothers me about, these 2 fights in particular against Hunt and Dos Santos is that, we see fighters get hurt all the time. Just a few weeks back, we saw Jeremy Stephens get hurt very, very badly in that first round with the body shot that landed from Yair Rodriguez, but he fought through it, he recovered, he got back in the fight. The difference with Lewis is when he gets hurt, he doesn't get back in the fight. That's it. Once he's hurt, he's done. And it just bothers me how, once he's hurt, it very much affects his performance. He doesn't try and hide it, he doesn't try and mask it, he doesn't try and fight through it. So it's just another bit of a red flag for me, something I've observed that I feel is important to talk about, and just maybe one of the reasons why I don't really so much like a bet on Lewis. But of course, it's no secret that Lewis has had some things holding him back over the last few years. He has admitted to not having a very good diet over the last few years. He has admitted to not being able to train properly because of knee injuries and back injuries. He's always said one of the reasons why his cardio has been so bad throughout his UFC career is because he is a really big boy and he can't do cardio because it puts too much stress on his knees and also his back, which are already injured. So there are a couple of clips I want to play you now from Derek Lewis this week in his Fight Week interviews where he talks about this kind of stuff and changes he's made for this camp. So I'll just play them here so you can hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
I have to say, you're looking phenomenal.
Yeah.
Svelte.
Yeah.
How much you weigh?
I've been in the 60s for the last 2 weeks. That's the first time ever. Usually, this day I'm like 285, 290. Then I try to cut everything in one day.
So now you don't have to cut anything?
Yeah, cut anything.
You're under 265?
Yeah.
What's been the secret to this weight loss?
The secret really been nutrition. I brought the guy in. He'd been living at my house for like 2 months and just making sure I eating all my meals and drinking right and keeping hydrated and stuff.
Has it been hellacious, like having to eat really clean?
Oh, for sure, because he's original Italian, you know, because I think Olive Garden is better than, like, the best Italian food out there anyway. So he coming in with a little different kind of Italian that I'm used to. Yeah.
And when it's over, are you going to maintain this diet, or are you going to go back to just eating, kind of fast food stuff?
I was going to maintain the diet, but I heard that Popeye's bringing back the chicken this Sunday. So I'm firing him. He don't even have to call me no more until the chicken run out. Then I call him. Yeah.
You use the all-you-can-eat thing?
Yes, for sure. I used, yeah.
It's kind of funny that you bring that up because we're exactly a year removed from that whole thing happening.
In San Antonio when it came.
I mean, you've admitted to kind of having to compensate around the injuries and stuff. How is this going to affect your performance on Saturday? Do you feel like we're going to see you more so at your fuller potential than we've seen in the past?
Oh yeah, you see a full potential. Even my breathing, my cardio and everything is a lot better than what it was my previous fights, and only because I've been doing my diet and also been training a lot more, a whole lot more. Yeah.
That's good stuff. Glad to hear it. And you were the first fight officially announced for this card. It's been kind of official.
So there we go, guys. Straight from the horse's mouth, you can hear Derek Lewis saying he's training more than ever, he's eating better than ever, he's coming in lighter than ever. Maybe he could look completely different on Saturday night. Come out, move better, throw more strikes per round, be more active, and take Ivanov out. You know, in the eyes of the bookie, this is a 50-50 fight. If you're asking me who I lean towards, definitely lean towards Derek Lewis. You know, with Ivanov being so easy to hit, I just like Lewis's chances of landing something big and knocking him out, even though he's never been knocked out before. I usually wouldn't go against that, but you know, when I see him stood right in front of Tuivasa exchanging bombs, I just think Lewis has got a great chance of catching him with something. And also, you know, Lewis sounding like he's in the best shape of his career. Maybe he'll show up and look a hell of a lot better on Saturday night than we've seen from him in the past. But for me, there's just no strong positions on this fight. I don't like how Lewis kind of folds and quits mentally when he gets hurt. I also don't like how he does have this kill or be killed style, and he looks to take his opponent out as opposed to actually win a fight in terms of, you know, staying active enough to win a decision. So this one's an easy pass for me, boys. Again, sorry to be boring, but that's just the way it goes. And again, I would also say with these fights that particularly the two that I've just covered, Ivanov, Lewis, Thompson, Luque, you know, these are fights where this is one of the biggest events of the year, right? UFC 244 is a massive event. On these big events, we often see loads of crazy odds movement on fight day, because think about it, the odds move depending on how much money is bet on either fighter, and the majority of people place their bets on fight day. So you very often see a lot of line movement on fight day. So if you start to see, you know, Lewis get up to like the 2.20, 2.30 region, he'd be worth a bet. If you start to see, you know, Thompson get up into the 2.20, 2.30 region, he could be worth a bet. So that's going to be one of the things that I'm looking out for tomorrow. You know, one of the reasons why I'm not putting out a breakdown for the fight between Masvidal and Diaz this week is because I believe that if I wait until closer to the time of the fight, I'm going to get a much better deal than I'm going to get if I bet this fight now, because I think the odds are going to move a bit tomorrow. So you've just got to play the market, play the odds, let the odds do the work for you. But with that being said, let's get into the next fight between Kelvin Lee and Gregor Gillespie. And my God, we have got a lot to talk about with this one. So in most of the breakdowns that I put out, the main component of the breakdowns are always, you know, how two fighters match up skill for skill. How do I see this fight playing out from a technical point of view? But this is possibly one of the few breakdowns where I feel like I'm going to be talking about X factors a lot more than I'm going to be talking about how these guys actually match up for skill. Because from a skill point of view, this is quite an easy fight to cap. We know exactly what we're going to get because Gregor Gillespie's tactics pretty much the same in every fight. He comes out the gate at 1,000 miles an hour, super aggressive, and just looks to take his opponent down, grind him out, and just beat him up on the ground, right? That is basically what Gregor Gillespie brings to the table, which is why this is such a fascinating matchup, because Kelvin Lee is also a very strong wrestler. Now, when we look at what Kevin Lee's biggest weakness has been throughout his career, it's obviously his cardio. And that's what makes this such a difficult matchup for him, because in contrast, Gregor Gillespie's got cardio for days. He could come out, get in his opponent's face, push a crazy pace of 15 minutes, punch his way inside, tie Lee up, start working, force him to work to defend takedowns, beat him up. He's just going to constantly force Lee to engage, and that brings us on to the first X factor that I think we need to address, because Kevin Lee has moved to train a TriStar for this fight. For the first time ever, he's going to have Firas Zahabi in his corner, and a lot of the talk this week surrounding this fight has been whether Kevin Lee's move to TriStar is going to help him long term. And I really do feel like Kevin Lee moving to TriStar is one of the best decisions that he could have made. I feel like TriStar is one of the best gyms out there for Kevin Lee's style of fighting, because TriStar is heralded as like one of the best MMA gyms in the world. And it is one of the best MMA gyms in the world, but I feel like TriStar have a very rigid system, a very rigid fighting style that they try to apply to all fighters. And some fighters thrive under this style, other fighters don't. TriStar is very much one of these camps that's hit and miss. Sometimes fighters go there and they improve a lot, sometimes they don't. You look at fighters like Joe Duffy and Joanne Calderwood, their careers definitely went backwards when they trained at TriStar. They definitely weren't. They went backwards, athletically, technically, everything. They declined going to TriStar, whereas other fighters have done very well once they've gone to train there. And I do think Kevin Lee's going to be one of those guys that does very well at TriStar, because if we think of the TriStar style of fighting, the TriStar system all revolves around getting fighters to a point where they are good at everything, not great at anything in particular, just good at everything, and keeping the fight competitive for the first 3 or 4 minutes of the round, but not putting yourself in any danger. Firas Zahabi gets his fighters, keeping the fight standing, just avoiding in any big shots, avoid getting into any exchanges in the first 3-4 minutes of a round. And then what he'll do, if he's got a striker, he will instruct them to turn the pace up in the final minute and a half of a round, to land some big combos, land a big shot and steal the round. If he's working with a wrestler, he'll shoot a late takedown, finish a round in a dominant position with a minute or a minute and a half left to go in the round to put your stamp on the round. Firas Zahabi is a genius, because he's very, very good at understanding the importance of winning rounds and putting his stamp on rounds. We know MMA judges tend to score fights or score rounds in favour of the fighter that finished the round the strongest, and the TriStar system is completely built on that. The problem is some fighters, when they go there, that doesn't suit their style and it confuses them. Other fighters, it does suit their style and they thrive. I think Kevin Lee's going to be one of those guys that thrives, because he is good everywhere. He does have the boxing, the striking, defense to keep fights competitive for the first 3-4 minutes of a round. That'll help him pace himself and conserve energy. And then in the final minute and a half in a round, you'll see Kevin Lee use his excellent offensive wrestling to shoot a takedown and try and steal the round. Kevin Lee has got one of the best double leg takedowns in the UFC. His technique shooting double legs is incredible. If you want to go and see a picture perfect example of how to shoot a double leg takedown for MMA, go watch the Edson Barboza fight. It is absolutely picture perfect from Kevin Lee. Now, I've just said great things about the TriStar camp and how they're really going to be able to help Kevin Lee turn his career around, get it back on track. Unfortunately, I don't think the move to TriStar is going to help him at all in this fight. I think in time it will. I don't think it's going to help him at all, because in order for the TriStar system to work effectively, you've got to have an opponent that plays that game. You've got to have an opponent that will play nice with you in kickboxing range for the first 3 or 4 minutes of each round. Gregor Gillespie is not that guy. Like we said earlier, he's going to get in your face. He's going to force you to work. He's going to initiate crazy exchanges. He's going to try and punch you in the face, take you down, grind on you in the clinch. There won't be any opportunity for Kevin Lee to use the TriStar system here. And that's why I do feel that we're going to see a version of Kevin Lee that looks very similar to what we've seen from him before. Now, that doesn't mean Gregor Gillespie is going to beat him, but what it does mean is, for everyone out there watching that is wondering, how much of an impact Lee moving to TriStar might have on this fight, I personally don't feel it'll have any impact at all. But it's definitely something to pay attention to in future fights. So, what should we go on to discussing next? Alright, okay. So, obviously, we can't cover this fight without talking about Kevin Lee's potential staph infection, right? A lot has been talked about it on social media today, so if you haven't seen it, here it is. This is Kevin Lee weighing in today at the early weigh-ins with a potential staph infection on his chest. Remember, this wouldn't be the first time that Kevin Lee had a staph infection. He also suffered from a staph infection for his UFC 216 fight against Tony Ferguson. Here you can see the potential staph infection there on the chest. And of course, Kevin Lee not looking particularly good at the weigh-ins. Looking quite rough here, to be honest, and this is the potential staph infection there. So the next thing that we have got to address is this a scar from UFC 216? And straight away we can see that it isn't. So this is a picture of Kevin Lee from his fight against Kevin Ferguson, and you can see the staph infection is on the right side, not the left side. So he's got it on the left side at the moment. As you can see here, this is clearly on the right side. So this is a completely new infection. This is not a scar. Now, the difficulty that I've got with this is that I don't know enough about staph to know if this is a staph infection. Here's another shot of it here at the ceremonial weigh-ins. I don't know enough about staph. Here's a slightly better shot of it here. Please, guys, let me know in the comments below if this is staph or not. Give me your opinion. I am sending the bat signal out to you boys. I have no idea if this is staph. I don't know enough about it. A lot of people are telling me that it is, but I don't know if it is or not. And whether I bet this fight is really going to depend on if this is a staph infection. It looks pretty bad. The problem is, when I Google pictures of staph infections, the Google search results are so varied that it don't look like that. But then, when he definitely had staph for his fight against Tony Ferguson, it was confirmed that it was staph. It also didn't look like the Google images that are getting thrown up as well. So I don't know what to think. Let me know in the comments, guys. Because, obviously, if he does have staph, which is looking very, very possible that he does, the real question here is how much will it affect him going into this fight? And you boys know that I have always got you covered. So, you know me, boys, I don't like to work in opinions. I only like to work in facts. So, let's hear straight from the horse's mouth how much Kevin Lee's staph infection affected him last time when he fought Tony Ferguson. Here is Kevin Lee talking to Joe Rogan about it.
Ridiculous. How frustrating was it for you going into that Tony Ferguson fight with that staph infection? Because that was a serious fight. I didn't notice it at the weigh-ins, but then the moment you walked into the cage, it was funny, man, because they were telling DC don't talk about it. Because I was going, that's staph. That is fucking staph. And then they said to DC, don't talk about it. He goes, yup, that looks like staph to me. He just ignored him. He's like, fuck you. I'm telling him that's staph, man. I don't know why they didn't want anybody bringing it up, because it's an important point. It's an unfortunate thing that happens during training sometimes.
Yeah, I kind of noticed it on that Sunday. And then Tuesday we do the check-ins and everything, and I had the girl. I'm like, can you, put some makeup on it, because I didn't want, nobody to find out. And even Tony, if he would have saw it, he would have knew. He knew I compromised all that. Yeah. But it frustrated things. It made things a lot more complicated. It made the weight cut terrible. Just to go back to it, I mean, I'm cutting from 76 to 50. I had to be 55 for that fight, and I tried my best to skim it down in about 12 hours. So I woke up at 5 a.m. at about 162, and weigh-ins are between 9 and 11. And from 5 a.m. till 8 a.m., I had only cut 1 pound. Compared to in other cuts that have gone really well, I would normally cut about 4 or 5 pounds at that time. But because I just was feeling good and I wasn't worried about it, and I was using the same temperature of water, I was using the same everything, but the staff made my body hold on to the water. So when I went down and checked and saw that I was still like 5 pounds up with like 2 hours to go, they started like throwing boiling hot water on me to get, to get my body. Yeah, to get me sweating to get it off. It was brutal.
Yeah, that's for someone who never experienced staph. Explain what it does to your body.
Yeah,
how it makes you feel.
The next day, I felt so tired. I never felt as tired in my life, and I felt so tired to the point where I tried to counteract it by getting myself as pumped as I can. And you normally get there 2 hours before the fight. When I walked into the arena that night, 2 hours before, I was in a sweat. My body was like full of adrenaline.
So you weren't taking any medication? You weren't going on antibiotics? You figured? Did you have to decide whether you should take antibiotics and then that compromises your endurance for sure, or just let your body fight it off?
I had it before, so I had been on the antibiotics, and they just make me feel terrible. If you've ever been through it, I mean, it's a terrible feeling. So I just was like, you know what? I think I can just push through it. And I'm young, and I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, let's just go. Like,
did you try any natural remedies?
Yeah,
like tea tree oil or anything?
So there you go, guys. Straight from the horse's mouth. It is quite clear that when a fighter has a staph infection, this is pretty nasty business. Just to quote Kevin Lee directly there, he said he never felt so tired. It made his weight cut so much more difficult. He felt terrible. And what's interesting is he said that he didn't take any antibiotics and felt terrible. He also said that when he had it before and he took antibiotics, he felt even worse. So it's kind of like no matter how he is dealing with this potential staph infection, in some way it is going to affect his performance on Saturday night. And also, another thing that I felt was pretty interesting was that he said he had it before. So if he had it before, that's one occasion. If he had it for the Ferguson fight, that's twice. If he's got it again now, that's 3 times. It's a bit of a recurring theme. Maybe it's like a recurring infection that he keeps getting. Because I do know a little bit about the bacteria that causes the infection, the Staphylococcus aureus. And I do know that once you do get that bacteria in your system, I mean, everyone's got a little bit of it in their microbiome, but once you get like a high concentration of it in your system, a high amount of this bacteria, it's very, very, very difficult to get rid of it. It's one of these strains that is like antibiotic resistant, very, very difficult to get rid of. So could be that, now that Kevin Lee's had one infection, it keeps coming back all the time. And seeing how he performed in that Tony Ferguson fight, his output did fall off a cliff in the second round. And you've got to remember, in that fight, for very, very large periods of that fight, Kevin Lee was in total control. Whereas I do think it will be difficult for him to totally control the fight against Gregor Gillespie, because Gregor Gillespie never stops moving. He's an NCAA Division I wrestler. We know Tony Ferguson's biggest weakness throughout his career has been his takedown offense, and he's quite weak off his back. We saw that with Kevin Lee, able to basically take Ferguson down, dominated from top position. I mean, even had Ferguson mounted at one point early in the fight. So the staph thing's serious, boys. Please, I'm sending out the bat signal. I am interested in betting on Gregor Gillespie because of that. Leave a comment below. Let me know if it's staph or not. You boys, look, in the UK, we don't do wrestling in high school. Wrestling's not a thing over here. Grappling's not a thing in the UK. I know you boys in the United States, you'll have a lot more experience with this kind of stuff. Help a brother in the UK out and let me know. What do you think? Is this staph? Let me know, boys. Is this staph? Because if it is, it sounds like Kevin Lee's going to be going into this fight significantly impaired. So one of the reasons why I do think this staph infection is a pretty major factor to take into consideration is because, like we said, if it does really affect Kevin Lee's cardio, I mean, Kevin Lee gasses out very regularly. The only time I can really remember seeing him in a high-paced fight where he didn't gas out was the Edson Barboza win, where he looked fantastic, but he usually slows down a lot. And with Gregor Gillespie pushing a crazy pace, with staph on top of that, it's not good. However, from a technical point of view, I would say Kevin Lee has got quite a big advantage when it comes to striking. You know, Gregor is quite scrappy, quite reckless. Kevin Lee's definitely the more technical striker. And I would also say that there's a lot we don't know about Gregor Gillespie's grappling. I mean, I know he is an NCAA Division 1 level wrestler, but that doesn't always transition very well over into MMA. I mean, if it did, you know, every single weight class would be packed full of NCAA Division 1 level guys, but it isn't. And it isn't because, you know, high level college wrestling doesn't always translate over into MMA grappling. And when it comes to MMA grappling, Kevin Lee is elite. Very, very strong wrestler. Very, very high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. And out of all the guys in the lightweight division, Kevin Lee probably puts it all together the best on the ground. You know, he has one of the best back takes in the division. Beautiful rear naked chokes. Very, very technical on the ground. And we haven't seen anything of Gregor Gillespie's submission defense. You know, any kind of submission defense, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu defense. We don't know how Gregor is going to react if he gets put in a bad position. So it's very possible that Kevin Lee's the underdog here when he actually has the advantage both standing up and on the ground. We don't know for sure, but it's very possible. Now, another X factor that we've got to take into consideration here is obviously the size difference between Kevin Lee and Gregor Gillespie. Now, I don't think that this stare down here really shows the size difference that well, because Kevin Lee kind of like stoops down to Gregor Gillespie's level, and I've only just remembered that there is another video which illustrates this. So if we just go here, couldn't really see the size difference there, but if we go to the media day stare down, just find it here. Sorry guys, should be better prepared. Oh, excuse me guys. Let's take a look. Media day stare downs. This is what we want. Here we go. So we can see, right, both guys are wearing, first thing you've always got to pay attention to when you're trying to like gauge size differences is you need to look at the footwear that both guys are wearing. But here you can see both guys are wearing the same Reebok trainers, right, same Reebok sneakers. So it's not like their footwear make them look taller. And here we can see it didn't really show up as good in the ceremonial weigh-in, because as soon as they came together, Gregor looked down and Kevin Lee kind of like lowered his level to look up and try and look into the eyes of Gregor. But here we can see as they come together, Kevin Lee is much, much, much bigger than Gregor Gillespie. He'll have quite a big size advantage here. And again, even now he starts to stoop down and it doesn't look as big of a deal. But just know Kevin Lee does have a pretty big size advantage. And I think you'll see it again here when they turn to face each other. There we go. From this angle, you can just see, oh, okay, Gregor's turned again. But there you go. You can kind of see that Kevin Lee, bigger head, just a bigger dude, more physically imposing. And, of course, size matters in MMA. It's one of those things we're going to be talking about a lot in the next breakdown between Gastelum and Till. So, you know, if these boys start mixing it up on the ground, maybe Lee will just be too big and strong for Gregor to handle. Because you know, Kevin Lee's absolutely no picnic on the ground. So, if we think about this fight from a betting perspective, obviously, it goes without saying, with the uncertainty around Kevin Lee and the staph infection, even though Lee is, around the 2.27 underdog, and you know what's interesting, boys, the odds have actually started to move. I was saying a minute ago that we're bound to see some crazy line movement on this this big pay-per-view, and Kevin Lee's odds have declined. Gregor Gillespie's odds have improved actually since I started recording this. So Kevin Lee's odds are down to around 2.25 now, which is plus 125. Is it 2.25 on average? Call it 2.30 on average, which is plus 130 for an implied probability of 43%. I'm just not interested in betting on a guy that might have a staph infection, especially when we hear straight from the horse's mouth in that Joe Rogan interview just how badly that can affect the fighter. But if we look at the odds on Gregor Gillespie, currently around about, let's actually put the best odds in, because I shop around for odds, boys, to be honest with you. So, you know, if I lock in a bet, it's usually close to best odds. So the current implied probability at odds of 1.69, which is minus 145 on Gregor Gillespie, is 59%. So to get any value here, you want to be capping Gillespie at around about 65% here. It's an interesting one, right? Because the way I look at this fight is, so these odds have improved since I started recording, right? They've jumped up. They were 1.64 an hour ago. Now they've jumped up to 1.69. So I'm not going to make a decision here and now, because I really need your guys' help to tell me if this is definitely staph or not. Tell me, boys. Please help me out in the comments. What I'm going to say is, this is how I see this fight. If Kevin Lee has staph, with the pace that Gillespie sets, you know, this relentless pace that he fights at, Lee's probably only got cardio for one round. Now, in that one round, he can give Gillespie hell. He could cause him big problems standing, but again, we know Gillespie's got a great chin and he's very tough. He can cause him big problems on the ground. You know, he's got great back takes, great submissions, very heavy top game. But if it goes past the first round, if Lee's definitely got staph, you'd heavily lean towards Gillespie. Gillespie's got a great chance of winning. So an implied probability of 59%. Is it fair to cap Gillespie into the 65-70% range? I mean, if Lee's got staph, fucking right it is. But I don't know enough about this. I really need you boys to help me out. So I haven't made my mind up on this fight yet, boys, because like I say, literally since I started recording, Gillespie's odds have started to move, and we're going to see that a lot today. This is fight day. The majority of people place their bets on fight day. We're going to see a lot of odds movement today. I'm seeing Johnny Walker's odds decrease since I started this video. So let me know, boys. I'm sending out the bat signal. That's how I feel about this fight. Please let me know. All you guys in America that are familiar with these kind of infections, because in high school and stuff you used to grappling, let me know if this is staph or not. Please let me know. I will read your comments. I love you, boys. I really do. And with that, let's move on to the next fight. Sorry I can't give you a definitive answer, but I haven't even made my own mind up yet. Let's get on to the main fight. The main fight that we want to talk about in this video. Darren Till against Kelvin Gastelum. And I've said it a couple times already in this video, where before I've researched these fights, I've heavily leaned one way. I heavily lean towards Ivanov. I heavily lean towards Luque. And this fight was no different. Before I started researching this fight, I heavily leaned towards Kelvin Gastelum. I planned to be betting on Kelvin Gastelum in a big way this week. I was going to go big on Gastelum. Because like many of you watching this, like many people, I just felt that Gastelum, you know, granite chin, cardio for days, heavy-handed southpaw, he'd be able to fight his way inside, land a bomb on Till and knock him out. That was how I saw this fight in my head. But again, this fight is a great reminder as to why fight research is so important, because your mind will play tricks on you. I thought Kelvin Gastelum would be free money territory. I thought it would be a rock solid bet. I thought it would be one of the best bets of the weekend. But like I always say, I like to work in facts. I do not work in opinions. I do not give you my opinions on these fights. I just share facts. I just show you what is true, what the footage shows, what the interviews show, what the weigh-ins show. It's all facts that I share with you. And when I began to research this fight, one of the first fights that I watched was Kelvin Gastelum against Ronaldo Jacare Souza. And I honestly couldn't believe what I was watching, because I was heavily leaning towards Gastelum in this fight. And then I watched this fight, and I see Gastelum getting outstruck by a 39-year-old, flat-footed, single-shot throw-in Jacare, who was gassed out of his mind. Jacare lit Gastelum up in this fight and outstruck him in the second and third round. I feel this was a semi-robbery. I feel Jacare won this fight 29-28. Dominated Gastelum in the first round. I feel that he won the third round as well. So I go from, having visions of Gastelum being this young, hungry, aggressive, heavy-hitting, fast southpaw, stepping in the boxing range, getting inside on tilt and knocking him out. And then all of a sudden, I'm watching this guy getting outstruck by a flat-footed, gassed-out 39-year-old Brazilian grappler. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking to myself, hang on a minute. Gastelum's a giant favourite. He got outstruck by an old Brazilian grappler, and now he's fighting a 26-year-old, 6-foot-tall, young, hungry British bull, British lion, British gorilla, stepping up into a new weight class. That's not a good deal. That's definitely not a good deal. And of course, then I go on to watch further fights because, again, I deal in facts, not opinions. And I watch his last fight against Israel Adesanya to see that he barely landed anything in the first 12 to 13 minutes of this fight. We always say the size matters in MMA. And it was clear the size really mattered in this fight. Now, I know Israel Adesanya is the best middleweight on the planet. I know he's very elusive. I know he's hard to hit. I know his striking defense is great. But Kelvin Gastelum really struggled to get inside on Israel Adesanya. And of course, we know Darren Till does a great job of fighting long. Yes, he keeps his hands low. Yes, he keeps his chin up high and exposed. But he does fight very long. He is very rangy. And to be fair, I'm going to say something many of you are going to disagree with. I'm going to say something many of you are going to leave a nasty comment about. But Darren Till does have a very good chin. He's had 19 or 20 pro fights. And he's only been KO'd. Well, he wasn't even KO'd against Woodley, but he was dropped by Woodley. But he's had 20 pro fights. And he's only been dropped twice. Or KO'd once and knocked down and submitted once in those 20 pro fights. And there's no shame in being knocked down by Woodley. There's no shame in being knocked out by Masvidal. In 20 pro fights. Over the years, if you followed Darren Till's career, I've followed him for a long time. I'm a British guy. He has a very good chin. He's extremely tough. He's the kind of guy that you have to kill in order to beat. And don't forget that when you do go through a brutal weight cut and you severely dehydrate your body and you severely deplete your brain, you're going to be less durable. You're going to be less able to take a punch. And now that Till is moving up to middleweight after killing himself to make 170, very, very good chance his chin will be a lot better. He'll be able to take a punch a lot better. So there's interesting stuff to think about with this fight. Now, when I began to research both these boys, it really didn't take me long to see that this fight was a hell of a lot closer than the odds suggest. And if you completely disagree with me, if you're questioning what I'm saying, before you go and tell me how much of a clueless idiot I am in the comments, I just recommend that you go and watch Kelvin's fight against Ronaldo Jacare Souza. Watch this fight and then tell me Gastelum deserves to be a 1.44 favourite. Bearing in mind, 1.44 odds of around minus 227 give Gastelum an implied probability of 69%, which means you've got to cap Gastelum at 75% or better to win this fight. This is a guy that was outstruck by a 40-year-old grappler. Just think about that before you leave a nasty comment. So, the first thing that I guess I need to say before we get into breaking down all aspects of this fight, because we're talking about this fight from a betting perspective. We've just mentioned Gastelum's odds. I think that Darren Till is a very good bet this weekend. If we look at his current odds, they're currently floating around about 3.0. We pop that in. 3.0 is plus 200 for an implied probability of 33%. That's straight up disrespectful. To only give Darren Till a 33% chance of winning this fight, it's not realistic in my opinion. Now, this bet on Darren Till is very risky. It is a high risk bet. It is one of those bets that you don't expect to win. This is what I would call a value bet. So for example, if you're familiar with playing poker, this bet would be the kind of bet where, you call a raise pre-flop with 6-7 offsuit just to see what the flop gives you. You don't expect to win the hand, but you know the risk to reward ratio is going to be very good if you win that hand. That is the way I see this bet. I don't expect Darren Till to win this weekend, but I also don't believe he only has a 33% chance of winning. You've got to at least give him a 40% chance of winning this fight, which would give you a 7% margin over the betting site. It's far more realistic to get closer to 45 to 50% in my opinion, based on everything we're going to discuss in this breakdown. But 33% is disrespectful. I feel 40% is pretty accurate. Now, many people will struggle to deal with this concept, but if you're asking me who I think wins this fight, I actually think Gastelum will win, which I understand is a bit of a paradox. It's a bit confusing. People won't understand why you would bet on someone who you think will lose. So, to help you kind of understand the reason why, I've come up with a bit of an example. It's not a great example, but it may help you get inside the mind of a high-level gambler. So, when I place bets like this, I just expect them to lose. As soon as I place the bet, I kiss the money goodbye. Just like when you buy a lottery ticket. When you buy a lottery ticket, you don't expect that lottery ticket to win. When you hand that money over, you kiss goodbye to the money. And if it doesn't win, it doesn't win. It's a bonus if it does win, but you're not that disappointed if it loses. You know, if you buy a lottery ticket and it loses, you don't get mad at yourself for picking the wrong numbers. That's just the way that things unfolded. That's the way that the universe unfolded on that night. And that's the way you've got to deal with these high-risk bets. You know, you don't bet too much on them. Keep them small. Little bit of a flyer. Little bit of a value bet. You may think a guy will lose, but you know enough about the sport to understand that the odds are off. That's what this Darren Till bet is. And in the past, I've given you plenty of these high-risk bets. And I don't feel like I've done a good enough job of explaining that. So hopefully that example will help you understand that sometimes it makes sense to bet on a guy that you think will lose because the risk to reward ratio is very good and the odds are inaccurate. That's why I think Darren Till is a good bet this weekend. But there's a whole other whole load of reasons why I think he's a good bet that we're going to get into now. So obviously we spoke a little bit about it in the last fight with Kevin Lee and Gregor Gillespie, and we were talking about size being a factor. And at the end of the day, size matters in MMA. It's why we have weight classes. And Kelvin Gastelum is simply too small to compete in the middleweight division. At 5'9" with a 71.5-inch reach, he actually has a wingspan that you'd usually see in the featherweight division. Realistically, Gastelum should be competing at lightweight. But for whatever reason, due to his diet, due to his discipline, he chooses to fight in the higher weight classes. But generally speaking, that will cost you over time. You know, we saw him really struggle to deal with Adesanya's size in his last fight. And I'm sure he's going to struggle to deal with Darren Till's size in this fight. Because if we look at it, Darren Till, 6 foot tall with a 75-inch reach. He has a big size advantage over Kelvin. And we can see it here at the weigh-in. And of course, this is a good opportunity to talk about how great Darren Till looks. He had to kill himself to make 170 pounds. Now, when fighters move up a weight class, they often look much better. You know, you think of examples like Anthony Smith, he looked terrible at middleweight. Absolutely terrible. And when he moved up to light heavyweight, he looked great. Donald Cerrone looks flat-footed, chinny and fragile at lightweight, but he fought like he was in the Matrix at 170. And if you look at Darren Till, clearly too big for the welterweight division. I mean, look at this size difference here. Absolutely towering over Kelvin Gastelum. If we can see the zoomed out shot, far more evident in the zoomed out shot here. As they approach each other, you can just see Darren Till much, much, much bigger. And size matters in MMA. And remember, Darren Till fights very long. Very, very good at keeping his opponent on the end of his punches. Darren Till will be able to land shots on Kelvin from positions where Kelvin will not be able to counter. Size matters in MMA. So that is one of the reasons why I do think Darren Till is worth a gamble. Just one of the reasons, though. Just one of the reasons. So, another thing that we've got to basically address in this video, And I don't really think it's going to be that much of a factor. But obviously there was some controversy surrounding Kelvin Gastelum's weigh-in this week. Or this morning. If we look at it here, Kelvin Gastelum does not look good here. And notice how Rafael Cordeiro makes a beeline for him. Now there's a few interesting details to pay attention to here, which makes me think something very, very dodgy is going on. So if we look at the other weigh-in, we get the early weigh-in video here. Let's bring it up. Sorry again for not being more prepared, guys. Usually I've got all these videos loaded up. But let me just find this early weigh-in video. This is when we want. Shout out to MMA Fighting for putting such a great video together. Please hit the like button on their videos and also mine, boys. If we just find Jennifer Maia. Where is she? Here we go. So Jennifer Maia used the ring here to weigh in today. Now I know a lot of the females, they do use the ring. Male fighters are more likely to use the towel, but just a little detail to pay attention to. If we look at the towel here, look at Rafael Cordeiro's body language here. So Rafael Cordeiro's kind of overseeing this entire situation. You don't know who Rafael Cordeiro is. He is Kelvin Gastelum's head coach, his trainer, the lead guy at King's MMA, the owner of King's MMA. Here we can see Rafael Cordeiro is the guy that brings the towel out here. He's not waiting to see if, the commission brings the ring out or the towel. He doesn't want there to be an option. He wants them to be using the towel. And look, he is all over it here. He tells them, you hold it there, you hold it there. And look how Cordeiro rushes round to the back of Gastelum. So the Gastelum's got something to lean on. Look at this. Look at this. Look at where he's standing. And the most important thing about this for me, when Gastelum actually eventually weighs in, look at how quickly they jump off the scale. They can't wait to get out of there. They're like two jabronis that have just robbed the bank, and they can't wait to get back in their escape vehicle before the cops turn up. Gastelum clearly leaning on Rafael Cordeiro there. Clearly leaning to take some of the weight off the scales. And look how quick they jump off the scales and run away like a couple thieves in the night. And look how relieved Kelvin Gastelum is looking here. And of course, this is very, very dodgy. Here, Ariel Helwani tweeted out a message from the commission that says that the commission has reviewed the footage of Gastelum's weigh-in, and the commission has determined that Gastelum made contact with another person while on the scale. This is a violation of the weigh-in policy. As a result of this, the commission will pursue disciplinary action. So they're not going to, take disciplinary action in terms of making Gastelum, not be able to fight or something like that this weekend, but they are going to fine him. And it was later revealed by Ariel Helwani that it looks like the New York State Athletic Commission are going to fine Gastelum 25% of his purse and give it to Darren Till. And obviously 25% is more than what Till would have got if Gastelum would have just missed weight. Usually when a fighter misses weight, they usually have to give up 20% of their purse. So this is very, very significant. Clearly, the commission knows that there was some foul play here. Clearly, the commission feels like Gastelum cheated. And it's all just a bit shady. So, with all the drama running up to this fight, with Darren Till potentially missing weight, the late flights, it turns out that Gastelum was the guy that may have a bit of an issue. Because it looks like he would have missed weight here. And now, I didn't really know how I felt about this. Because Gastelum is quite a small guy for the division. How much does a few extra pounds really make? And I wasn't even sure if there was any foul play with Rafael Cordeiro. I wasn't even sure if leaning on him like that made any difference at all. But Nick Pete, shout out to Nick Pete, done his podcast in the past. He is a UK MMA legend. Nick Pete, one of the best journalists in the game, one of the very few truly legit MMA journalists in the game. Nick Pete gave a very, very interesting perspective on this whole, towel leaning situation. And I think you should listen to it. So just hear what Nick Pete has to say.
He said it's going to suit him. And so Darren, honestly, he couldn't be in a happier place right now.
Yeah. Regarding Kelvin, kept us waiting, didn't he? 2 minutes left before the official weigh-ins was all done and dusted.
Yeah.
In he comes. Obviously, needed maybe a little bit of extra help, leaning on his pals to get himself through.
A little worrying. And he looked all right yesterday at media day.
Yeah.
He was smiling. He was fresh. He was, he seemed like he was full of energy. I remember looking at him yesterday thinking he must be quite close to weight already.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know what happened in the final few hours, but I mean, to leave it so late, and he had to step on the scales by 11 o'clock. Otherwise, he wouldn't have got the extra hour. You get an extra hour.
I don't think so. I don't think so in New York. I think
right?
you've got to weigh in
Within that 2 hour period.
within that 2 hour period in New York. State Athletic Commission rules, but just to wait so long and weigh in right at the last minute and to tip the scales at 184, officially 184, just doesn't make any sense to me at all. If you were on weight, you weigh in 2 hours earlier, you're first in the queue. If you're 2 pounds inside what you're allowed, 1 pound inside championship weight, you don't wait around for 2 hours to prove a point, to prove, oh, I'll make everybody wait for me. Dan knows, cutting weight. You're desperate for a drink. You want that drink more than anything you've ever wanted in your life. There's no way he's sat in his room thinking, I'll cruise down, I'll weigh in 184, keep everybody hanging. It just doesn't work that way, does it?
No. And he missed the hotel breakfast as well. I mean, this is the other thing. You want to get on the scales at 9 o'clock so you can get hydrated and be back down in time for breakfast.
So very, very good perspective from Nick Peake there. And, very, very suspicious that Gastelum did what he did. And Gastelum's got a long history of fighting injured, and you have to wonder, is this whole incident a sign that maybe he's injured, maybe he's ill? Has something prevented him from being able to make weight? And again, is he coming into this fight on Saturday night impaired? Who knows? But he said he was injured for multiple fights in the past. Every time he loses a fight, he tends to say, he wasn't 100%. So is Gastelum impaired on Saturday night for this fight against Darren Till? There's a very good chance, and that's just another reason to take a shot on Till at big underdog odds. So, where should we go to next? I've got so much to say about this fight. So, I will now go through more reasons basically why I think Darren Till is a decent bet here at big underdog odds. But please remember throughout this breakdown that Kelvin Gastelum's an absolute beast. Hits very hard, granite chin, cardio for days, very, very tough. Darren Till has absolutely got his hands full here. I actually believe it's more likely that Gastelum wins, but like I say, the risk to reward ratio on Till is very, very good, and I think he is definitely worth a small calculated bet. So, look, let's get into some reasons to bet Darren Till. And what I will say is I'm not sugarcoating anything here. If I tell you that I believe Darren Till is a good bet for the reasons I'm about to list, you fucking better believe I'm very serious about this. So the first thing to take into consideration is, you guys know me. At the end of the day, fights aren't fought on paper, they're fought in the octagon. But it is worth noting that Kelvin Gastelum has never beaten a top middleweight, ever. If we look at Gastelum's record, we can see that all the guys that he's beaten in the middleweight division were way past their prime. Tim Kennedy was completely shot when he fought him. Same as Vitor Belfort. He actually lost to Whiteman. And we know how bad Whiteman's looked over the last 2-3 years. Bisping completely shot. Bisping was knocked out and hurt bad by GSP like 3 weeks before this fight took place. Jacare's almost 40 years old. And he lost to Israel Adesanya. So even though fights aren't fought on paper, the point I'm trying to make is Gastelum's never beaten a top rated middleweight ever. He's never beaten a young, hungry, athletic monster at 185 pounds in his prime. This weekend against Darren Till, this is one of the first times, aside from Adesanya, where we are seeing Gastelum fight a true, legit middleweight in their prime. And it's just something to think about. For the most part, Gastelum has been beating up guys that were way, way, way past their prime over the last 3 years. Just a little something for you to think about. Now, from a technical point of view, the first reason why I think that Darren Till is worth a bet here is because Gastelum and Darren Till are both southpaws. Now, southpaws have a big advantage. You know, you think of the entire Rocky story, right? The Rocky movies. Rocky was a southpaw. Southpaw advantage is a real thing because, roughly speaking, 70% of fighters fight out of the orthodox stance. So orthodox stance fighters aren't competing against southpaw strikers that often because there are far more orthodox stance fighters, so they get used to facing orthodox stance fighters. When in the heat of combat then in the octagon they finally run into a southpaw, they're seeing southpaws throw strikes from weird positions and weird angles that they're not used to, and it catches them out. Because like the saying always goes, the shots that knock you out are the ones that you don't see coming, and that's why the southpaw advantage is so huge, because they throw shots from strange angles that people don't expect, they don't see it coming. So that's what leads to southpaws having what appears to be knockout power, but it's not actually knockout power, it's just that their shots come from positions that catch their opponents off guard. Now, Gastelum and Till are two southpaws, and what you often find when two southpaws run into each other is that you end up with a lot of awkward, goofy, sloppy striking exchanges where the two southpaws aren't really used to competing against a fellow southpaw, and neither guy is anywhere near as dangerous as they usually are. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is Gastelum has vicious knockout power when he's fighting old orthodox stance fighters. Maybe he won't be that dangerous against the fellow southpaw, particularly a southpaw in Darren Till that's much bigger than him, fights very long, and is also the more technical striker. If we're looking at a southpaw-southpaw dynamic, you'd think that that southpaw versus southpaw dynamic would favour the more experienced striker. And there's no doubt in my mind that Darren Till is a more experienced striker. I know Gastelum's more of a pure boxer, whereas Darren Till lives and breathes Muay Thai. He throws a far more diverse range of strikes. He's got elbows, knees, all kinds of different kicks, all kinds of different punches. Whereas, you know, you may see Gastelum throw the odd kick from time to time, but for the most part, he's just a boxer. The southpaw versus southpaw dynamic should favour Darren Till, whereas it's likely to hurt Gastelum's more basic style because he doesn't have as many weapons in his arsenal. And again, that's another reason why I do like Darren Till in this fight. He's just got more weapons to win. You know, elbows in the clinch. He's extremely strong in the clinch for his Muay Thai background. The knees, like I say, the elbows, the punches, the kicks. Way more ways to hurt Kelvin. And while we're on the topic, you know, many of you watching this will be saying, well, what about Gastelum's wrestling? And for me, Gastelum's wrestling is a bit of a myth. Gastelum is not a strong wrestler. You boys know me, I like to work in facts, I don't work in opinions. And if you go back and watch any of Gastelum's fights, you can see that he looks like a very, very weak wrestler, and he's very low level on the ground. You've got to bear in mind the size matters, and it is not going to be easy for an average 5'9" wrestler, very, very average wrestler, to take down and control a big, strong, 6 foot tall powerhouse like Till. If anything, with Till's lucha libre background, I would give Till the advantage on the ground because I feel he's so physically imposing that if these boys mix it up on the ground, Till's going to be able to overpower Gastelum. You know, if we go back and watch their past fights, every time Till has got into top position, his ground and pound is devastating and his top game is very heavy. And we also know Till has very, very good takedown defense. You know, you might have memories of him being put in bad positions by Woodley, but remember, that didn't come off a takedown, that came off a knockdown. I'm not worried about Gastelum's takedowns, ground game, BJJ or wrestling in this fight. I think Till can more than handle himself if this fight goes to the ground. Could be wrong, but that's just the way I see it. So, what else shall we talk about? Okay. One of the other reasons, and probably the most significant reason why I recommend betting on Darren Till in this fight, is because Kelvin Gastelum doesn't have very good striking defense. He gets hit a lot. And I noticed this in the Jacare fight. Jacare was literally lighting him up. I mean, if you're a young, hungry boxer in his athletic prime, how do you get outstruck by a 40-year-old grappler? I don't understand. But Jacare did outstrike him. And Gastelum just gets hit a lot. There's no denying it. His striking defense isn't good. And remember, boys, I don't like to work in opinions. I like to work in facts. So please, let's hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
How much confidence does it give you knowing that Till knocks a lot of guys out? You've never been knocked out. You're very durable. Do you see that as an advantage in this fight?
Not necessarily. I mean, people like to think that I rely on my chin too much. I don't like to get hit. I mean, it's not that I rely on it. I just get hit, and I have a good chin. So I don't rely on it. It's not something I'm banking on.
So there you see, guys, straight from the horse's mouth, Kelvin Gastelum basically saying he gets hit a lot and he's just got a good chin. That's the way it is. But boys, remember, look at the guys that this guy has been fighting. Guys way past their prime. Now, Jacare was lighting Gastelum up, but he was gassed out of his mind in this fight. Jacare was gassed out of his mind. Adesanya, very, very dangerous striker, but he's more of a volume striker. He's not the kind of guy to put you away with one shot. I know obviously he knocked out Whittaker, but if you think back to Adesanya's fights against Vettori and Tavares, more so breaks you down with volume than landing that big KO shot. Whereas Darren Till, in the welterweight division, carries legit one-shot KO power in every strike. Devastating kicks, devastating punches, devastating elbows. You do not want to test your chin against Darren Till. And Gastelum said it himself. He gets hit a lot. Go back and watch the Jacare fight yourself. He does get hit a lot. You do not want to test your chin against Till. Because trust me, Till had devastating KO power at welterweight. He is likely to hit way, way, way harder in this new weight class at 185 pounds. And remember, like we said earlier, yes, from time to time, when fighters move up a weight class, they look worse. You know, we can all think about Daniel Cormier. He looks much worse at heavyweight than he does at 205. Luke Rockhold, much worse at light heavyweight than he did at middleweight. But generally speaking, when a fighter kills themselves to make weight and they move up a weight class, generally speaking, they look better. And I think we're going to see Darren Till look a hell of a lot better on Saturday night at middleweight. That's another reason. So, what else haven't we covered? Alright, so those are all reasons to bet on Darren Till, right? But remember, this is a high-risk bet. So for all the reasons there are to roll the dice on Darren Till and take a chance on him, we've got to cover the risk factors here. And there are a lot of risk factors. Kelvin Gastelum is an absolute beast. He's an absolute nightmare. He is a warrior. And now if we just think about some of the risk factors to this bet. So obviously my initial feelings could be correct. You know, maybe Gastelum does bite down on his mouthpiece, fight his way inside, land a bomb and knock Darren Till out. It's a significant risk. Could definitely happen. Also, we were talking about the southpaw versus southpaw dynamic. Maybe that throws Till off. Maybe Gastelum does react better to the southpaw versus southpaw dynamic. And maybe Darren Till's not comfortable fighting a fellow southpaw. Maybe he gets knocked out as a result of it or struggles. Again, cardio has been an issue for Darren Till in the past. We have seen him slow down as the fight goes on. So you would assume that it's better now that he's moving up to middleweight, but maybe it's not. You know, Luke Rockhold had a tough cut to middleweight, moved up to light heavyweight and gassed out within one round. Doesn't always mean your cardio is going to improve. I mean, the best example I can think of is remember the first time Conor McGregor fought Nate Diaz at 170 pounds. He literally looked like a white Irish Tyron Woodley. Blown up, muscular, again, gassed out within a few minutes. So you'd think Till's cardio would be better at middleweight, but you never know. There are plenty of examples where it's worked against the fighter and their cardios look worse. Also, we can't ignore all the disruptions to Till's travel this week. You know, he was late getting the fight week. This might have disrupted his weight cut, might have disrupted his sleep patterns. Who knows how jet lag may have an impact on his performance this week. I mean, I know there's only a 5-hour time difference between New York and the UK. And one of my elite members, Drexia, was saying that his partner actually lives in New York. He does the flight over to New York regularly. He's from the UK. He said the time difference is nothing. You basically don't feel it. Who knows, oh man, everyone's different. Maybe it does affect Darren Till, but I really appreciated that insight from Drex because, I trust his opinion. He's saying it shouldn't be that much of a big deal at all. And we've also got to take into account a really, really significant factor, something that we talked about in the Thompson versus Luque breakdown, in that, in Darren Till's last fight against Jorge Masvidal, Darren Till was brutally KO'd. I mean, this was one of the most vicious KOs we have seen this year. I mean, it was just as bad as the Ben Askren knockout by Masvidal. Till was out. Vicious, vicious, vicious KO. And sometimes fighters never recover from these KOs. Not only can these kind of knockouts do lasting damage that changes a fighter forever, but it can also affect your confidence and your ability to pull the trigger. And maybe when Till gets in there on Saturday night, he's still feeling nervous, still feeling insecure, still lacking in confidence from being knocked out in front of all those fans in the UK that came out to see him fight Masvidal. Maybe that has a big impact on his performance. So, with that being said, boys, I think I've covered everything. Sorry it was a bit of a jumbled up breakdown, but I had a lot to say and it's quite difficult to organise everything. But yeah, basically, the way I look at fights like this between Gastelum and Till is that in order to bet on a guy at these odds like we're seeing on Gastelum, they have to tick every box, okay? If you look at the odds on Gastelum, 1.43, implied probability of 70%, moneyline odds of minus 233. You look at these odds and you're thinking, with all the things that I've covered in this breakdown, is that correct? Does Gastelum have a 70% chance of winning this fight? And if your answer is no, you've got to start to look at a potential bet on Till. And I feel like with the odds being this wide, with Till being such a big underdog, there are so many reasons to take a gamble on Till. Because even on the very, very basic of levels, we saw Gastelum struggle to make weight. There's definitely something fishy going on. He could quite easily be injured going into this fight, which automatically means there's value on Till. So that's the way I look at this bet, boys. It's a high-risk bet. Don't bet your car on it. Don't bet your house. Don't bet your wife. Don't bet your favourite camel or your last Rolo. It's a high-risk bet. It's probably going to lose. But the risk-to-reward ratio is very good. I feel like the odds on Till at the moment, around 3.0 plus 200, are straight up disrespectful. At worst, I give him a 40% chance of winning based on everything I've discussed in this breakdown, which would give you a 7% margin over the bookie. But again, don't go crying over spilt milk if this loses. It's a lottery ticket bet. It's a calculated gamble. It's the kind of bet in poker, the kind of hand where you play, like I say, you call a raise pre-flop with 6-7 suited to see what the flop gives you. That's the kind of bet I would compare this to. But hopefully Till comes through for us. I do think it's a strong position to put our money because the risk to reward ratio is very good. But who knows, man? Gastelum is an absolute beast. And I could definitely see him going out there and absolutely starching Till on Saturday night. That's just the way it goes. That's why they call it gambling, boys. All you can do is consistently put your money in a strong position over a long period of time. And if you do that, ultimately you will make a profit. Now, with that being said, that brings us on to the Masvidal versus Diaz fight. Now, I'm not going to be doing a breakdown for that fight this week because I think that is a fight I will be betting. Like I've been saying in all the videos I've put out this week, I am waiting to see these odds move. Fight day is the day when the majority of people place their bets. You see the majority of money flying around on fight day. And for that reason, on fight day, you tend to see a lot of odds movement, particularly on these big pay-per-view cards. So I am expecting to see a lot of line movement tomorrow. And I'm expecting to lock in a couple more bets tomorrow. Even now, while I've been doing this breakdown, the odds on Gregor Gillespie have improved. And now, as soon as this video finishes, I'm going to go and do a little bit more research on that fight because I'm thinking Gillespie might be a good bet at these odds. But what I would say to you is, even though I am not going to be putting out a YouTube breakdown on the Masvidal versus Diaz fight. Obviously, if you're a member of my website, if I choose to bet this fight, which is likely I will be probably betting this fight. Obviously, I will send you an email as soon as I add the bet to the website. But if you're not a member of my website, this would be my advice to you. In my opinion, it is quite obvious who has the best chance of winning this fight. If you really want to bet Masvidal versus Diaz this weekend, go and sign up the UFC Fight Pass. This is not a plug. This is not sponsored content. But it is the best $10 you will spend this weekend. Because if you go and sign up for a subscription to the UFC Fight Pass, within 2 hours, you can go back and watch all the fights from Masvidal and Diaz over the last 2 or 3 years. Call it 2.5 to 3 hours. Spend 2.5, 3 hours on Saturday. You can watch all of Masvidal and Diaz's recent fights. And I'm very confident that if any of you watching this go and do that, no matter how much you know about this sport, if you go and watch all of Masvidal and Diaz's fights over the last 2 or 3 years, you will know who to bet this weekend. You won't need me to tell you. You will know because it is very obvious. And with that being said, boys, I am praying in the way that I want them to, because there are plenty of fighters that I am thinking of betting. So thank you for watching this, boys. I hope you appreciate this video. I hope you also are not too disappointed that I'm not doing a Masvidal Diaz breakdown, but I really want to bet that fight, and I think that if I put a breakdown out, it might maybe not make the odds decline, but it might slow them down. So I'm just going to let the MMA betting market decide for themselves where the closing odds on Masvidal versus Diaz should be, and hopefully they're going to be where I want them to be, and I'm going to be able to make some money from it. So I know that's quite selfish, but at the end of the day, this is Diary of a Pro Gambler. I do this for a living. Making money is my priority. But like I say, watch all their recent fights. It will be very obvious to you who has the best chance of winning. So with that, boys, I hope you like this. I hope Darren Till comes through for us this weekend. If you like this video, please hit the like button below. And also, please subscribe if you haven't already. And next week, for UFC Russia, we've got lots of debutants and lots of fighters who haven't been in the UFC for that long completing on that Russia card. So we're going to be doing loads of live streams on Twitch, loads of live research sessions, and I'll be putting out loads of breakdowns next week for that UFC Russia card. So thank you for watching, boys. I really appreciate it. Take care. I fucking hope you crush it and make loads of money at UFC 244. Have a wicked weekend, boys. I love every single one of you watching.